Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good evening. You're with me, Mazlina Ismail, in this program Shaping Tomorrow. Alhamdulillah, in this episode we have Shafiq Burhanuddin, Senior Research Officer at IKIM. Assalamualaikum, Shafiq.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. This week, inshallah, we'll be speaking on this topic, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's struggle and vision. As a start, why would you like to speak on this figure, inshallah?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, DJ Maslina. Indeed, I think for several reasons. I think, of course, firstly, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi is a monumental figure, I think, in modern Muslim history, in particular the 20th century. And we will discuss more about that. But also, I think, since in this season of Shaping Tomorrow, we have begun with a tribute to the late Allahyarham Royal Professor Engku Aziz, another noted figure in Malaysia of the 20th century. And subsequently, we did we dedicated an episode on the Hashemite monarchs, another, I would say, perhaps a key actor or actors in the 20th century or modern history of the Muslims. Hence, I figured it would be incomplete to proceed in this season to exclude a figure of the standing and of such experience, such as Bediuzzaman Said Nursi, whose name actually is Said. And Nursi is actually the place he is from, his village, Nurs in Turkey. And while Bediuzzaman is a title that is given to him, meaning wonder of the age, because of his brilliance, his intelligence. So, according to records, it was given by other teachers of religion who became acquainted with him, perhaps, I think, including his former teacher in the madrasah.
I see.
So I would say very briefly, well, and so much so, if I can add, he's, I think, increasingly well known today. I think because the fact that there is more and more academic studies on his works, on his contributions. Of course, he's, as we will inshallah share a bit more later, he's not so much a political figure at all, but although he was involved in politics at an early phase of his life, but he's better known for his contributions to scholarship, to da'wah, to the spread of Islam, especially in Turkey, and also to the revival of Islamic consciousness amongst Muslims in Turkey in particular. I think his struggle is so inspiring that even a noted Arab scholar by the name of the late almarhum Shahid Sheikh Ramadan Al-Buti, a very respected figure who passed away quite recently from Syria. Right? And Sheikh Ramadan Al-Buti is respected by majority of the Arab scholars in the Middle East. For his piety, for his works, and Sheikh Ramadan Al-Buti actually said that when in paying tribute to to Said Nursi, and this is actually rare for an Arab scholar to really show their reverence or respect for a non-Arab scholar. So this is quite a rarity and unique for someone like Sheikh Ramadan Al-Buti to make a remark as I'm about to share. So basically, he said his intellectual or scientific privilege is a known fact for him. But for him, the main factor that gives the ideas or the works of Said Nursi is not so much because of its precision in logic, according to Ramadan Al-Buti, nor is it because of its philosophical sophistication, but it's because there is a sense of taste when you read his books, he said. And Ramadan Al-Buti is of the opinion that this must be due to his due to his prayers, to Nursi's Said Nursi's sense of sense of well, he said ubudiyah, meaning a sense of humbleness or slavery before God.
Right.
And so much so, although Ramadan Buti never met Said Nursi, but he could taste, he could sense, he could feel that through his writings.
Right.
So I think this is, I think, amongst the reasons why I feel that, although I'm not an expert on this figure, there are indeed many experts on this, and inshallah we will share some books as we proceed. And this is one book, I think,
Yeah.
a good introduction that we have at IKIM Library.
That's
I'm showing
brilliant.
on
Camera.
the camera,
Yeah.
if you're watching on the video.
Yes, yes.
And this is written by Dr. Colin Turner and Dr. Hassan Horkuch. And both, I believe, are noted academics, scholars on the works of Said Nursi. So they are definitely more knowledgeable people out there on this figure. So, but inshallah, what we'll do in this episode is just to share from our limited research and our reflections, perhaps comparing it with whatever we have read before or whatever we have learned before, inshallah.
Inshallah. Even the introduction is enough to inspire people to find out further or to even read the book that you have just displayed just now. But would you please now explain or elaborate further on Said Nursi's significance to Muslims in the 21st century?
Yes. He was born in the late 19th century,
Okay.
so in Turkey. So, but that means that period of Turkey was still the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
So the Ottoman Empire was still present, although it's undergoing tremendous challenges externally and internally. Is going that period of time that Said Nursi lived in Ottoman Turkey was turbulent, intellectually, spiritually. People were challenged by new ideas being brought from Europe, philosophical, scientific ideas, and it appeared that many of the teachers of religion then in Turkey, they were not able to perhaps effectively respond to these new developments in coming from the West, coming from Europe. And I think if we look at the literatures on that period of time, it seems like the process of some called westernization or modernization of the Ottoman Empire was very gradual. It happened almost perhaps in a period of 100 years, you know, in the 19th, beginning from the 19th century in particular. So when we try to see what is Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's significance, I think we have to understand the context he was living in, and so it was a context of great challenge, somewhat similar to what we are facing today still, and also another, I think a major or a recurring theme as far as Said Nursi's engagement or struggle throughout his life is with the secularizing ideologies or secularizing mindset that is becoming more and more prevalent and influential in Muslim societies. But as far as Said Nursi is concerned, even in the Ottoman amongst the Ottoman educated elites, amongst the Ottoman government officers, he's seeing this. Eventually, he saw that this is becoming like a disease, a poison. I think the term that he used.
Okay.
So his experience in dealing and engaging with this vast intellectual challenge, I think is very instructive for not only scholars and academics, I would say, Muslim scholars and academics, but also I think for the average Muslim today who are trying to thrive better in this 21st century and beyond, because I think he is Said Nursi basically he's an inheritor somewhat of the Ottoman legacy, so he's still very much in touch with our past, our civilizational past, the Muslim civilizational past. While on the other hand, he's more and more in tune and cognizant the new world that is starting to emerge and impact upon the consciousness and the thinking of the Muslims. So I think that's one aspect in terms of how he is significant, because of his experience, personal experience, educational experience in dealing with us an external ideology, a secularizing ideology, which can cause negative repercussions to Muslims' way of living, and eventually, I mean, it led to, of course, I think in one way we can also say extremism. So much so that eventually, I think it's well recorded in history that that what led eventually to the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire was because a new breed of leaders and government officials who saw things differently than their forefathers, who were more inclined to adapt wholesale from the Western civilization in order to progress and develop, right? So I think that experience is definitely very instructive and useful for us to reflect upon and draw lessons from, so that we do not repeat the mistakes and learn and move, so that we, from this Said Nursi's experience, so that we can advance or progress and develop more appropriately as a Muslim in the 21st century. And also, of course, that is in terms of his experience. And then, of course, in terms of his writings, voluminous. Most renowned, of course, is his Rasail Nur, basically a series of treatises commenting on many aspects of the Quran. But a lot of his writings focuses on, again, responding to the growing atheistic, materialistic, secularizing tendencies among that he observed coming from Europe. So in a way, he's trying to respond to these alien ideas, foreign ideas, and articulating it based on what he learned or what he understands from the Quran and also the great scholars of Islam. So very, very inspiring piece. Piece, not piece, I would say, basically just a series of writings. And apparently, due to his writings, as we said earlier, it has impacted people intellectually, academically. And as we said, there is until today, I think as recent as maybe a few years ago, there are still international symposiums dedicated to Bediuzzaman Said Nursi. And there are many academic studies, and also, of course, what the impact that is most visible impact is a very huge movement of Muslims, Islamic movement, that exerted a great deal of positivity in Turkish society as well as surrounding regions, and I think by now globally there are also associates to this movement, even in Malaysia, I believe, and they're trying to not only continue the knowledge part, the knowledge legacy of Said Nursi, but also the good work, the amal, the good amal soleh, that in terms of charity works, humanitarian works as well. So yeah, in a gist, there's two. So that I would say perhaps that is why Said Nursi is very significant, or somewhat significant for Muslims to pay attention to what he has done today, in the past, and for us to pay attention today is number one is his experiences in dealing with the modern or secularizing ideologies, and second is in terms of his writings. He has inspired many people intellectually, academically, as well as in terms of a movement of charitable and good works.
Okay. Shafiq, you did your own research and reading about Said Nursi. What can we glean from his life struggle that you can share with us?
Yes. But before that, actually, there is a film, in fact, produced about his entire life, and I think that's when I was particularly inspired by this figure. I think you can find it on YouTube. There is an English subtitle.
Okay,
It's
that's
called
great.
Hur Adam, I think. Hur Adam, Adam, Hur Adam. So basically, it's a reenactment of his life journey, which is very inspiring. So in the interest of time, there are so many things, but I think scholars or academics who have been studying on Said Nursi have divided his phases of life into three phases.
Yeah. Okay.
Number one is what they call the old Said, meaning the one that is more activistic or more politically inclined.
I see.
And then there is the new Said. I think that one that's when he produced his masterpiece, the Rasail Nur.
Okay.
And then the final phase is when he just completely withdrew from public life and just focused on teaching, small study circles.
Okay.
But I think what are some of the salient things which personally I found interesting is, number one is that in terms of his earlier life, before even this first category of old Said Nursi, he has been noted by observers or people who have been acquainted with him, or even his former teachers, is that he has this remarkable memory capacity to memorize things, even very difficult text in the Islamic science, Islamic intellectual tradition.
Right.
So much so that one of the sheikh that he encountered during his madrasa studies in his younger days authorized him an ijazah within a very short period of time, which is very unusual.
Right.
Usually students would take 10
Yeah.
years, he would take less than a year.
Mashallah. Oh.
Because of his so his brilliance and his intelligence and strong memorizing capacity has been noted from the young age. And apparently he comes from a family of learned, God-fearing family. And then I think a pivotal moment in his life, which would inspire his later life struggle, is at one time he had the opportunity to access a library of a governor of a province in Turkey where he was living in.
Right.
He just had access to it.
Okay.
And remember, with this remarkable memorizing capacity, he almost absorbed the great treasures that was available in the library, not only from the Islamic or the Arabic, Turkish sources, but including from the Western European ones that he was able to somehow digest and absorb. You see? So from that moment on, he saw the development of the sciences that coming from the West.
Right.
And he saw that that there is for Muslims moving forward, especially in Ottoman Turkey, which I think he does not negate the great achievements of the past. But I think at that period in 19th century, he saw something needs to be done to the madrasa education, to the educational system of the Muslims then, in order to be able to effectively thrive in this changing world where the Western civilization are producing remarkable contributions, new contributions to the sciences.
Okay. So what did he introduce?
Well, some of the books that he came across were on physics, chemistry, geography, geology, mathematics, astronomy.
To be taught in religious schools.
So that's one thing that we have to discuss a bit more afterwards. But basically, he when he came across that, he thought that this is definitely something that the madrasa you have to be learning and teaching, of course, to the students. Without compromising the religious sciences, of course. So later on, perhaps we could share, we have time, that's when he had a certain vision or a blueprint for a new kind of a university for the Muslim world that he proposed to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire then. And then very briefly, I think the first phase of his life, perhaps the young Said rather, that's when he actually he was somewhat actively engaged in the political arena in the sense that he advocated for freedom, for liberty, justice. These are some of the so-called moral slogans that people were championing. Actually, I suspect it's emerging from the West, coming from the West. But in any case, he felt that he was somehow aligned to that, you know. But later on, he came to realize that this direction of discourse is not consistent or desirable even for the Muslims' future. Because and there was a turning point, of course. The young Said Nursi actually fought in war, I think during World War I for Turkey. And then actually he was captured by the Russian forces. And he managed to escape.
Wow.
But when he escaped in 1918, this is an interesting part, I thought. By then, many people knew of his brilliance. A young, a rising alim or a teacher of religion. By 1918, I'm not sure how old he was then. I should have checked. But he was appointed by the highest leadership of the Ottoman state at the time as a member of a learned council or something like IKIM actually. He was appointed of this institute called Darul Hikmat Islamiyah, which is sort of attached or closely associated with the Sheikhul Islam, who is the highest religious authority of the entire Ottoman Empire. So Said Nursi was working for the special elite institution, something like AKIM.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Was appointed actually. And in fact, he initially he didn't want to. He refused, but I think somehow the leadership insisted that he be there. So he was appointed. Upon returning from World War I, he at first he was exhausted. He didn't want to. He just wanted rest. He fought and he got captured and and he escaped from the enemy of war. So he just wanted to rest, but because of the, I suppose, the scenario, then eventually he agreed. And basically, interestingly, this institution, this Darul Hikmat, its duties includes to promulgate and circulate the high virtues of Islam, to protect religious institutions in the best possible way, and also to find solutions to the problems confronting the Islamic world, to answer in a scholarly manner to the attacks made on Islam, and combating attempts to discredit the religion of Islam. So anything pertaining to Islamophobia, they already ahead of time in terms of responding to it. But unfortunately, this institution did not survive long, because by the time the Ottoman state collapsed, this institution was shut down as well. But interestingly, in this institution, there's something that I wanted to say was that this Darul Hikmat, very interestingly, there were not many, but several big figures who are focusing on question of ethics, akhlaq, on fiqh, and also on creed, akidah. But and Said Nursi is one of them, and there's also another future Sheikhul Islam called Mustafa Sabri, and a few other individuals. But he noticed that this institution were not able to function as best as it could have, because there was a lack of a communal spirit amongst the scholars in the institution. So then however, he thought that this idea, this Darul Hikmat, is a very good idea. So I think this idea of an Islamic think tank in Muslim countries, I think it deserves to be continued and supported, by the highest leadership of a country. Because he said he does see its importance, because later on, he continues to advocate of this kind of learned council, this Darul Hikmat, to unify and to respond and to solve the many problems facing the Muslim world. But just after being in this period, he or during being in this highest learning or institution, he went through perhaps a spiritual transformation, a spiritual crisis, and a spiritual transformation.
Yeah.
Basically, he wrote down this that he's having this crisis. He said, I think in his one of his writings, he said, dreadful blows descended on the heedless head of the old Said Nursi, and he pondered over the assertion, al-mautu haq, death is reality. He saw himself in a muddy swamp. He sought help, searched for a way, tried to find a savior. He took an omen from the book of Futuhul Ghaib of Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. And when he opened this book by Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, the line says, you are in Darul Hikmah, so find a doctor who will heal your heart. The book was written hundreds of years before him, but when he read that book, that line came to his attention.
Amazing.
As if speaking to him directly.
Yes.
To basically to wake up and find a solution to your spiritual predicament.
Like a guidance.
Yeah. So that led him to a different trajectory in life, I suppose, Said Nursi.
Yeah.
And not long after that, in 1922, remember the first time he was appointed in this institution was 1918. 1922, this is when he met the famous encounter he had with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. And then he was called Mustafa Kemal Pasha. He was already a rising leader in 1922.
Okay.
They had a private meeting. They spoke for about 2 hours in the presidential room.
Okay.
And Said Nursi directly cautions this Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, cautions him about causing severe harm to this nation, country, and world of Islam. By abolishing the symbols of Islam in the hope of gaining fame among other countries, he warns that he basically cautions Mustafa Kemal Atatürk of severing harm by abolishing the symbols of Islam, which eventually happened. And he warns that if there needs to be a revolution, it should be directed towards strengthening Islam and should be made from the perspective of the sacred fundamental laws of the Quran.
Okay.
So eventually, as a result of that encounter, he made a remark, or he noted in his writing, that I went to Ankara in 1922. I saw that a powerful current of atheism was treacherously working to enter, corrupt, and poison the strong minds of the faithful, the believers, the mu'mins. I said, this monster is going to damage the fundamentals of belief. I wrote a strong proof derived from the Quran, powerful enough to destroy the head of that atheism in an Arabic treatise of light. I got it published in Ankara, but unfortunately, because those who knew Arabic were very few and those who took the treatise seriously were rare, that writing of his didn't really have its effect. So I mean, eventually that's why he would write his more bigger writings to try to benefit
Or reach out to
Muslims.
Yes.
So I think in terms of what we can glean from his life is that he had a talent, a potential, but that potentiality was harnessed, was further developed by himself and those around him, and then he was. Then he somehow Allah and guided him to a certain direction. Although he had a certain spiritual predicament. Although even someone with religious knowledge, Islamic knowledge, can still suffer that. I think but then he was able to Alhamdulillah escape from that predicament through Allah's guidance, and subsequently he was able to he experienced this challenging encounter or moment with the famous Mustafa Kemal Pasha or Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, which led to a realization on what he needs to do for the Ummah, for the Muslims at that period then. So yes, I think that's all we can.
For this week, we will have to continue on this topic, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's struggle and vision, as we have not learn about his vision, and also what should we learn or lessons from his struggles. Inshallah, we'll do that next week. And for this week, we thank you, Shafiq, for the introduction of this topic.
Welcome.
And until we see you again next week, inshallah, thank you very much once again. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.